I read your email back to myself, and I read the bit in brackets where it said Outlook was warning me, saying, "Are you sure you want to use that word for the recipient?" And you said, "Yes, okay, the recipient knows exactly what I'm talking about." Hello and welcome to the Cloud Therapist channel. I'm Richard Simon. This is the October episode of Cloud State of Play 2024. As always, I have the inspirational Paul Bevan with me. Paul is the Director of Infrastructure Research at Bloor Research. Hello, Paul. How are you doing?
Hello, Richard. I'm fine, thank you. And I always wonder what word you're going to use in front of my names. I think you're going to run out of the adjectives that you can use.
No. I have a whole treasure chest of those, and ChatGPT is there to give me some more in case I do run out of them. So there you go.
And the trick will be, can I spot the difference?
Can you
Yes.
spot the difference? Exactly. Well, actually, believe it or not, I do tick them off when I do use them. So
All right.
yeah, so
Okay.
every time it's a new one, and that's why I want to catch you to see what your reaction is going to be. That's definitely worth the effort. Yeah, so good to see you again, Paul. As always, we have our three usual sort of selection of topics. So let's go through those very quickly and give you guys a flavor of what we're going to be talking about this month. So the first one is Paul has been to Barcelona recently. He's been to VMworld. Was that they still call it that, Paul?
No, they call it VMware Explore.
Ah, okay. So it's changed to VMware Explore. Okay, so
Right. And I was at the specific analyst breakout session. So
right. Okay.
we did, yeah. So.
Okay, right. So a rearrangement of the decks on the Titanic. Fantastic. Okay. So VM, what was it again? I've forgotten the name already.
VMware Explore.
Explore. Okay, right. So sorry, VMware Explore. That's the Paul's going to give us a report from that and give us some highlights on what he got up to in Barcelona. Yeah, and it's going to be you're going to try and convince us that hypervisors, virtualization, and virtual machines are the future, Paul. Is that correct?
Of course.
Of course.
I expect you to be a complete follower by the end of it.
Yeah, complete convert. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So the second topic that we have moving swiftly along is a sort of a how to measure the true value of IT. This was a kind of a number of sort of reports and a suite of tools provided by Apptio, which is now part of IBM. So I think we'll kind of try and maybe pick on that. There's a couple of actually new areas that I picked up on in that space. Maybe they're new to me. I'd never heard of some of the terms there, but it was quite interesting to pick up on that. So how to measure the true value of IT. And again, Paul and I will probably go through some of that as well. So there's kind of a suite of software, SaaS solutions from Apptio in the TBM space. And we'll explain more what TBM means later on. And then the third one, Paul wanted to talk about sovereign clouds. Now, we've talked about, I think, data sovereignty in the past. I think that was actually way back in 2023 at some point. But Paul wanted to kind of have some words to say around sovereign clouds. So, yeah, not sure what that's going to be, but we'll find out soon enough. Okay, so, Paul, let's talk about VMware Explore. I got it right.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting for me. I mean, I haven't really followed VMware a great deal in the past few years. You're aware of vSphere and NSX and vSAN, etc. But actually, as a sort of cloud story, I know some of your views about it as well. So I won't try to go with an open mind, and particularly given the last 12 months of the year since they were taken over by Broadcom. Right. It's been a fairly roller coaster ride, I think, in
to say the least.
More ways than one. Yeah. And a lot of fairly negative press. We'll come back to that. But, the usual thing is that when you get to these events, you find that the world is not quite as black and white as you thought. So I think, some of the things that came out of it, I mean, the start point really is, you know, they've gone through this process, you know, under Broadcom's tutelage of reducing the number of stock units that they had, something like 8,000 apparently. It's crazy. SKUs down to a very small number into sort of 4 or 5 specific sort of product areas. But the main story coming out of the session really was that the whole of VMware now is doubling down on private cloud.
Right.
That's really, you know, the one headline and takeaway that, you know, the world is private cloud shaped. Well, there was an interesting keynote session from Hock Tan, who is obviously the CEO of Broadcom. Interesting character. And, you know, some of it was, I suppose, what's the best way of describing it? Some of it was interesting and sort of eye-opening. Others you just wanted to shout at. You know, it was one of those. I mean, so I think the big issue for me, and I know it is the big issue for you, is that as part of this focus on vCloud, they're calling it VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF.
Yeah, VCF, yeah.
VCF. So you just use the term VCF. They're focusing everything, and pretty much the whole organization is sort of plugged into VCF. Is that they're building such a story around repatriation. I know it, you know, it's one of the ones that drives you nuts. and that, you know, during the keynote, he put up a slide, which apparently used in the States version as well. And it was from a Barclays Bank CIO survey that basically said 83% of CIOs are planning repatriation in 2024.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
You and I had an offline conversation about that, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and right through the 2 days that I was there and having, you know, breakout sessions and round tables and more of the sort of broader sort of keynote type speeches, that theme of repatriation was being banged, you know, the drum was being banged on that fairly often. And I came away thinking that's not going to help them in the long term. I mean, there is clearly a move towards repatriating, if that's the right word, and you and I have talked about that. So we haven't yet got the right word, but moving some of their public cloud instances back into a private cloud arena, I think is probably the nearest to it. And there's a number of reasons for it, you know, whether it's data privacy or it's security concerns, and in some cases it might be cost. But as I say, I think the one thing that jarred with me was this sort of constant barrage of you know, repatriation. And actually, when you look at it, I mean, I, you know, with your help, I actually dug out the whole of the Barclays report, and you know, cloud. When you actually look at it, public cloud spending is almost twice what private cloud spending is projected to be in 2024. You know, and more people are thinking about growing public cloud spend than private cloud spend. Not to say that private cloud's not a good market for VMware to go for, because I actually think it is. I mean, there's no way that they're going to compete with the 3 big hyperscalers. I mean, that's just not on. So I think there's a big market for them to go at. But then, of course, the next part of the story, of course, is that they've upset their customer base so much with their move from perpetual licenses to subscription service. And it's not just the move from perpetual license to subscription. In the desire to reduce the number of individual products, they slimmed it all down and just slammed an awful lot of them into these packages, into these subscription bundles. And so the headline price for customers has been horrifically high. I think it's the only, you know, you can't get away from it. And I spoke to a couple of customers there who sort of had different strategies for dealing with it. And you know, one of the takeaways I came away at the end is that for both customers, large customers and large partners, VMware, there's a level of a realization maybe, or reality clicking into VMware that says we need to negotiate a suitable, sensible discount. You know, so I think some of that's going on. And there were others where actually what they were looking at was maybe doubling down on vSphere and thinking what else they would do, in the short and medium term, what other products were around there, or how could they more efficiently use the VMware products they'd already got to try and minimize the effect. But the ones I were talking to were saying, overall, yes, we've got extra costs. Some will carry some of them. Others, we're going to have to find ways of dealing with those.
Mm.
And I would have classified the customers I spoke to as sort of medium-sized enterprises. And you can see them having more trouble with this. So I think, there was a level of, what shall I call it, irritation, I think, when Hock Tan was speaking, when he said, I think the quote was, some people don't realize the value of the bundles.
Right.
And it was, he was trying to be upbeat through this, but he just the mask slipped once, and it came out as people don't realize the value, and therefore again that was the other thing that was being hammered, was the value of the bundles. As you went into the various meetings. So, I mean, the products themselves, I mean, VCF and Tanzu particularly, I think are good, solid products, and I'm intending to write a couple of Bloor papers on both of those products. And I was impressed with, I mean, they're not new. They're based on vSphere. They're based on vSAN. What they're trying to do at VMware is make sure they work better together. And there was a recognition from VMware that they'd not really made them work well together in the past. They'd not really helped with the silos that were created by using all those products. And there was a big push to say one of the challenges in 2024, 25 was to get customers to implement more of the bundle.
Right.
And to do that, they were offering a 15% of the value of the subscription in services to help them do that. So they was basically saying, to the customers and to partners, we'll pay, up to the value of 15% of the subscription value, we'll pay for the implementation services, which, depending on which analyst you talk to, was either that's a very good move, thank you very much, or my God, they must be desperate, so I think, and again, that's the whole piece coming along, is the next 12 months is going to be a really, it's going to really tell whether this approach that VMware have taken is going to work or not.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So was there kind of a lot more focus on product though? Did they kind of talk about? Did they flesh out sort of VCF and so on?
Only to a point. I mean, we were there for 2 days, and we were getting a very broad brush across the top. And in fact, in certain cases, I mean, the one that they did really sort of do in some detail, and it was one of the best presentations I think I've ever seen from a technology provider, it was on Tanzu. And I say best because it was comic. And they meant it to be comic. It wasn't as if, we were all laughing at it because it was so daft. It was brilliantly done to show how Tanzu has automated so many of the processes to make it easier for developers, etc. And they had a developer playing sort of devil's advocate, but saying, just give me the credentials, or I just want to use this tool, I just want to use that. And every time they came back around and said, well, it does this for you, and it automates that. You thought, yeah, okay. And it was just really well done. So at the end of it, you got, actually, they've thought this one right through. And of course, Tanzu potentially, and I say potentially, runs on non-VMware environments.
Right.
But I don't think VMware are anyway focused on doing that.
No, I mean, I think OpenShift has probably got that, market sewn up as well.
Yeah. The other thing that was clear to me was that VMware are going to focus from a sales perspective on their large customers. And I think that's a risk. But the product, there was a lot on Tanzu, and I have to think it's a strong, stable product. And I think VCF, building on the underlying strengths of vSphere looks good, but we need more detail. I mean, VCF 9 is not released into, yet. It's not released.
Right.
So we're still on previous versions of VCF.
Yeah.
And all sorts of questions are raised by customers about the migration process, and particularly for Tanzu. I mean, a couple of customers I spoke to were actually halting Tanzu developments until they could see what the path to Tanzu Platform 10, which is the new development, was going to be. So I think VMware have, it's a risky strategy they're taking because they're doubling down on not only, I mean, doubling down on private cloud's fine, but I think the way in which they've upset their customer base and the fact that they're really not going after what I call new logos. They're really going to focus on the existing base, suggests, a long-term slow decline. That would be my take on it. But I mean, I think the products are good.
Yeah.
You and I would differ maybe on from a sort of cloud native point of view, but Hock Tan made the point in his opening speech, which made me smile and be quite happy for a minute until he said other things, was that, cloud is not a location.
Yeah.
And it was really about cloud is as I always say, a consumption model.
Yeah.
And the underlying technologies can be run in a private cloud. They could, he stressed that. And obviously they've got portability. They've claimed portability for VCF across on-premises private cloud, co-location, managed service provider, and the hyperscalers. So license portability and license compatibility software. Yeah. I say claimed because you don't get the chance to test that in practice. But if they get that right, okay, fine. But I just I have this sort of sneaking suspicion that if they keep banging the repatriation drum, they will get. Ultimately, people will say, "Oh, come on." It was interesting. We had, I won't name the other analyst, but a much larger analyst firm than Bloor Research, who spend an awful lot of time doing quantitative research rather than qualitative research, and have already used a similar headline to the Barclays report. Right. When we were in a round table talking about this, and the question came up, and we were challenging the figures. This particular analyst said, actually, in reality, it's nearer 15 to 20% who are actually trying to do it, not 83%. And it was interesting. I won't name the analyst firm for want of them's crying foul, but they had put out very large reports where people were able to take one or two headlines like that 83%. I don't know if they used the 83% figure, but it was certainly a very high one. And he quite specifically said, in reality, what we're seeing today is that somewhere between 15 and 20% of the enterprises we see are involved in some form of, and they use the term repatriation. I know that gives you the the heebie-jeebies every time I say
it. Yeah. Well, don't worry about it. I'll put their name in the description of the video, so we won't mention it, but everybody can have a read of the video.
Yeah, this is a bit like saying between you, me, and the television camera there. This is all right, okay.
Did they talk anything at all about VMC, VMware Cloud?
No.
Okay, because this was obviously one of the big things that they sort of started to do over the last probably 4 to 5 years. So they were kind of essentially putting whatever they called it at the time, vSphere, VMware, whatever they wanted to call it, they essentially put that on the other side of the fence in the public cloud. So they signed deals with Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, and got VMC basically to be hosted by them. And the idea was, customers will continue with VMware and continue to use vSphere, maybe dabble with Tanzu, and then those hyperscalers would really kind of stretch their arms out and sort of offer their public cloud services as part of that. And interestingly enough, when we've done lots of coverage on this, by the way, on the channel, so I'll try and include lots of the links for the discussions that Paul and I have had We've covered the whole sort of Broadcom thing, from the initial announcement to the acquisition being confirmed, I think, in October of last year, 2023, to some of the recent antics of Broadcom, like dissolving, all of the channel partners, the channel program, the partner program for VMware, and asking everybody to reapply again on Broadcom terms, and some by invitation only, apparently. I think stopping the free version of the hypervisor as well, which kind of has some limitations, but a lot of people used it for sort of test and dev environments and so on, and a whole host of other stuff. So we've kind of covered that. But the curious one I had was around VMC, and it's interesting they didn't mention that, because also you may recall we had I think we briefly mentioned it in our conversations earlier this year, that AWS pulled out of actually doing VMC. I mean, they kind of made it sound like, oh, we're really devastated that we can't do this. And I was thinking, yeah, sure. I'm sure you're really cut up about that. But again, that was obviously kind of, as far as VMC was concerned, for me, it was kind of the beginning of the end.
Yeah, I mean, they've got it. The sort of, what's the best way to, because I think VMC has actually been wrapped into it's part of VCF. It's the same thing. I don't think there's any difference, but I don't think there's any real emphasis. It's almost, it's like VMware is saying, well, if you have to put it on AWS or Google or GCP or Azure, you can do. And there are services, there are certain sort of data backup services and things that you can imagine people using, but the reality of that, and quite frankly, with the focus that they've got on private cloud, they've decided that that's where they're going to pitch their tent and fight. They're not going to fight in the public cloud. There's no point. They'll lose that one, and therefore they're going to pitch it at private cloud. I think they're overdoing the repatriation message, which may come back to bite them. We've had that discussion, and in many circumstances, you'd say it's a sensible strategy, but we've seen the problem with both the partner channel and with the licensing, and and generally, people scrabbling now, I think, to understand what they need to do. And one of the concerns I have is that there's a level of what I call marketing myopia. There was a fundamental book back in the 60s about marketing myopia. I think they're so focused on this repatriation story and on VCF and everything that's entailed in that they're not really aware of what's happening in the open source world or in others, where people can look and say, well, I'll pick away at this until I've stripped out all the VMware pieces.
Yeah,
it's really interesting. I mean, one of the other things that they majored on quite strongly was that the cost benefit of using Tanzu, particularly against everybody trying to cook their own,
right?
With open source tooling, and you're going, yeah, but even now there are newer companies like OpenNebula, like Proxmox, who are coming up with potential alternatives and who will target the VMware base.
They have, and certainly I think it's given a shot on the arm to the likes of Nutanix and Mirantis, who are also pushing their own solutions. So Nutanix with hyperconverged, and and Mirantis with, well, whatever Mirantis is doing these days. It was OpenStack, and now it's OpenStack on Kubernetes or Kubernetes on OpenStack or something. So, but point being is that I think VMware had that sort of market sewn up quite well. Yes, they were hemorrhaging customers to cloud and cloud native with Kubernetes and containers and so on. Tanzu was their kind of response. That was the acquisition they did of Apptio back in 2018. And I was part of Apptio, and I was involved in that at the time as part of that acquisition. But all of that, was kind of their response. There was a huge, horrendous spending spree by VMware between 2017 and 2021. It included Apptio, Bitnami, Carbon Black, and a whole host of other organizations. I don't know where those all went. I don't know where those products are.
Carbon Black seems to have ended up in, of the sort of 4 or 5 key solution sets, there is one around security. Now, I'm not a security expert, and I didn't spend a lot of time because I'm trying to focus on cloud and Tanzu particularly. But there was a whole section for people to go and talk around security, and Carbon Black probably ended up in there. The other one that they were focused on quite strongly was the whole sort of SD-WAN side, which was interesting, and
Well, Avi Networks.
Velo Cloud and Velo Rain, and so there was, yeah. But in 2 days, my brain was already getting frazzled. So I'll have to come back around the houses on those ones.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the other acquisitions was Avi Networks or AVI Networks. So they were kind of in that sort of software-defined sort of networking space as well. But again, yeah, I mean, I think for me, I really don't see the point. It's like I said earlier, it's the rearrangement of the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Well, I mean, potentially it's long-term decline, but when one of the challenges, and we had a good presentation from a regional telco, an US and regional telco. I would call them medium-sized enterprises. And this is probably where the sweet spot actually is. People who are heavily invested in VMware products generally, who want more flexibility, who want to have an agile development environment, who want to do CI/CD pipelines, but are sort of struggling both to get the people to do it and also, to literally make a big break. So to have somebody like VMware move that way, I think, the danger, of course, is that ultimately that's not a long-term sustainable proposition. But I think there's a large market out there. And my other concern is that VMware will think these guys are not worth the effort and that they'll try and go for the big boys.
Yeah.
And that's got a real risk, because the big boys have their own capabilities that says, I've got all the skills and services to go do this on open source or somebody else's platform or cloud native or whatever.
Yeah.
And VMware, that's why I say I think there's a level of marketing myopia potentially coming in, that VMware think, hey, we can go and get all the big customers because they're all repatriating.
Right. Yes. Well, yes, I think they can continue dreaming in regards to that. So
I think only you and I will only disagree on scale and speed. I think
yeah, no,
how fast that's going to happen.
Yeah, no, I think we're okay on that. I mean, I do appreciate kind of the world is coming from, we're coming from that world. We're coming from that sort of.
And it takes time. It really does take time.
And even virtualization itself, when it sort of started really coming in the early 2000s, it took 5 to 10 years, maybe longer, to really establish itself, and VMware to, not get. I mean, they eventually got self-indulgent, but to kind of expand the ecosystem. Things like vRealize and all the other tools that they had in that space. Now, just final questions, and we need to move on to the next topic. Did you ask any of my incendiary questions at all that I sent you?
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember what they were now.
On your WhatsApp, I sent them to you on WhatsApp.
I know you sent it to me on WhatsApp. I did. I remember. But interestingly, the one I thought would be most incendiary was your last question. What the hell was it?
The last one was, well, I don't know. Our exchange was quite long on those days. But the last one I asked was, what are there any publicly available figures to show the percentage of vSphere customers that are using Tanzu in production?
And you will be I did ask that, and you will be very surprised to know that I didn't get an answer.
Yeah. Yes, I'm really shocked by that. I think I sent you the name of one of their customers, and I said, if they're there, ask them, do talk to them or something. It's Charles Schwab, I think, or something.
Well, I didn't get
publicly publicly known customers.
The telco had it, that we interacted with, was using Tanzu in production. So fair to them. There was a managed service provider that does quite a lot of work for financial services organizations and rail and health in the Netherlands, and it was a local MSP. They'd actually suspended the use of Tanzu. It was really interesting.
Right.
Because theirs was the issue of how the hell do I, migrate it into the next levels of VCF and all those sort of things.
Right.
They were
Yes.
thinking, I just want to hold fire on Tanzu because of that.
Yeah.
So I think, with all these things, it's a nuanced story. But no, the one thing that was absolutely clear is that Broadcom were not going to give any breakdown of revenues by product group or implementations by product group, other than recognizing that's the big challenge. They're actually incentivizing their sales force not only on sales but on implementation.
Right. Right.
So they know they've got a problem.
Right. Okay. I think we can go on talking about this for a long time, but we need to move on.
I will be publishing my first part of a blog on that in the next day or so. So
cool. Okay. Well, we'll certainly include we'll certainly include that in the description of the video. I think it'll be useful for our folks to read. And yeah, there'll be I'll try and point us all to the previous conversations that Paul and I have had in this space, including the Broadcom acquisition and various other things that we've picked up along the way. Like I said, we've extensively covered it on the channel. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Okay, so Apptio, how to measure the true value of IT. Now, originally, I thought this was actually going to be like a white paper or report. I did eventually get to a white paper, which I will maybe get to later on, and I'll certainly include the link to that. But this actually really turned out to be kind of two things. It was kind of first, Apptio's tools and IBM's tools. Apptio's owned now by IBM. It was acquired a few years ago, and kind of their tooling around this whole sort of cost management, cloud cost management, FinOps sort of space. So that was kind of one aspect of it. The other thing that I picked up on a lot more, which was kind of not really something I've come across before. You and I have kind of talked about FinOps and cost management in the past and so on. But this new one, TBM, as I mentioned in the intro, Technology Business Management. So that's what it stands for. And I was kind of trying to really figure out how does TBM or Technology Business Management really fit in with FinOps and so on. So again, I went to my friendly assistant Copilot and asked Copilot for some summary of TBM. And it says it's essentially a framework that provides a structured approach for managing and optimizing technology investment in organizations. The idea is that it bridges the gap between IT, finance, and business operations to ensure the usual kind of, tech and IT is aligned with the business goals, blah, 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 all the usual things. So it hovers around and works around things like cost transparency, value realization, there's that word again, value, resource optimization, strategic alignment, and what was the last one? Performance management. So then I thought, okay, this is interesting, TBM. So how does it fit in with FinOps? Is it like, which one is the umbrella framework, or are they both part of something bigger, or what's going on? So the response here was, it said, TBM and FinOps are complementary disciplines that work together to optimize technology investment and cloud spending. TBM focuses on managing the overall IT budget and, as we said, to aligning that with the business outcomes, whereas FinOps is specifically designed for managing the cloud costs. So for me, TBM sounds like it's kind of the business interface, is the business aspect of how IT spends its budget and aligns with the business goals and so on. Whereas FinOps is really in the weeds of cost management and using various tools from all these vendors, and including Apptio's solutions as well. So I'm kind of getting the feeling that TBM is more IBM and the FinOps side is more Apptio.
I mean, it's interesting. I very briefly looked at what they'd written and didn't feel that they quite got out of the weeds. But the minute you talk about IBM, of course, IBM have been for some time quite keen on trying to show how the link between, cloud computing,
Yeah.
DevOps, agility impacts the bottom and top and bottom lines of businesses.
Right.
And I remember going to an analyst event at IBM probably 2 years ago, not last year, it was probably 2 years ago. Big thing being made about this. And then they sort of rolled out the reference case study.
Mm.
But when you actually looked at it, they were still talking about benefits in IT, not benefits to the business.
Right.
And I got the same again in Barcelona.
Yeah.
And it's the same telco company, because he was the head of IT for this telco. And we were asking him what business benefits he got from using Tanzu and the ability to be agile, all those. And all the things he talked about were benefit, technology benefits or benefits within IT.
Yeah.
And one of the ones that was absolute classic. I mean, bless him. He was great. He was very friendly and he shared an awful lot of stuff. But when it came to that sort of question, you could see the sort of panic in his eyes, because it was, well, he was going, well, the developers no longer think that IT are restricting them. Well, that's an interesting thing to say, isn't it? In the sense that you see developers as not part of IT, or developers don't think they're part of IT. But trying to get him to say, but what did that mean for the business? If the developers are developing applications faster, what benefit is the business seeing? Nothing. It just didn't happen. And the IBM one 2 years ago didn't happen. And that's an argument I've had for some time, is that, it's relatively straightforward if you're talking about applications.
Yeah.
It's relatively straightforward if you're talking about business process improvement, to see what technology has done to change the top and bottom line. And this goes back to my time in mainframes, trying to get people to think about, what benefit is this bringing to the business in terms of increased sales, reduced costs, It has been something that IT has struggled with. And they've always defaulted to the fact that, well, we're really just the hardware piece. Well, are you happy being commoditized like that? You will constantly be under pressure. And I think I've probably used this in the past, so apologies if I have. In a particular roundtable I was on, probably only the best part of a year ago, was a roundtable where they were talking about cloud, and particularly around analytics and the way in which cloud had democratized analytics, had made it possible to do a load more stuff.
Yeah.
The guy who was really senior in this very large European bank said, we've got, real problem with our finance people, because we're spending a lot more on analytics than we ever used to.
Yeah.
And to which your answer is, but have you not been able to work out the benefits of when you've analyzed something? Either you're just analyzing it for the hell of it, in which case more fool you, or you're not getting the message across, or there's no process for you working out the fact that you've now been able to analyze this, of it feeding its way up into not only procurement, because procurement can be a pain at times when if they're focused too much on cost, but also into senior management. Why is this one not happening? So that's a big bank, a telco, and it was, I can't remember, was it, I think it was it was a big logistics company in the IBM example. All three of them got, basically owned up to the fact that they're not getting across the benefits of cloud, agility, all those to the business leaders. And you go, why? And is TBM going to do that? I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, the bottom line on that says TBM tools and practices enable, because we said it was a framework. So it said it was a framework. It says the TBM tools and practices enable organizations to better manage their IT portfolios, improve financial management, and so on. But again, the thing for me is, because I think it says further down, about sort of resource management, but I don't know how that gets implemented. This is the thing. Is it like a ERP for IT resources or something? I don't know. It just sounds a little bit. I'd like to maybe just kind of see it in practice. It's something TBME, so to speak, TBM-ish, running in practice, and I can say, oh, okay, it's at that level, so I can kind of recognize which layer it's in. I think we've gathered, things like profiling is really low level stuff. You're in the apps and processes and whatever of the application, utilization, resources of the app, and so on. You've got things like cost management, cloud cost management, or cloud cost optimization tools like KubeCost and others, which are, focus on your, Kubernetes clusters and, try to optimize the resources in those, objects or elements within your cloud environment. And then you've got kind of FinOps, which kind of does the overall, cost. This is how much you spent last month, blah, 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 blah. Here's your savings, or here's areas that you can save on, maybe apply a bit of AI to that, and so on. But then does that mean kind of TBM is the next layer up, and that's the bridge between all that stuff that's happening below, including FinOps, and then sort of the business, business aspect of it?
Yeah, I from what you're saying, that's what it feels like. I say I didn't really get a big sense that was going on, but it was a very brief look. So I'll be, but it again feels like, we've seen it in other spheres where the newest, greatest in FinOps came along. And, oh, right, we're going to handle on costs and what benefit we're delivering. And the reality is it probably hasn't quite worked. And therefore somebody's come in with something above it, and again, the industry keeps doing that. And you think, okay, I suppose I'm being a bit cynical, but I'm sort of thinking, is this just another 3-letter acronym to say, hey, we're really trying to
TLA.
Another TLA. We're trying to, and we're trying to show business benefit. Well, most CEOs will go, not another TLA, please.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's. I'm not sure if it's. I don't know who's kind of come up with that. I don't think it's necessarily IBM. I could be wrong, but there is apparently a TBM council, and it says it's at that's where they have a white paper. So there is a white paper. It's still sponsored by Apptio, I believe, the white paper. But at least there is a white paper now, and it says it's at the intersection of TBM and FinOps. So that's where the paper is.
Well,
so we might cover that next.
We ought to dig it out and have a look and maybe come back and comment on it. And maybe this old cynic will change his mind.
Yeah, and there was also I think last week a TBM conference in San Diego. So again, this was on the IBM website. There was information on that. Now
they've got history of creating councils and sort of bodies that look like they're quasi educational.
Yeah. So IBM solutions in this space, just kind of give a little bit of highlight for that. IBM Cloudability, which they say is make cloud your competitive advantage. So it's cloud cost management, multi-cloud support, yes, usage monitoring, spending forecast, and then collaborative FinOps. Okay, so it's kind of enables collaboration between IT, finance, and the stakeholders. Okay, and then there's IBM Apptio. So Apptio itself, your single source of truth for tech spending decision. I think this is where Apptio is kind of getting into the weeds, right? So you kind of, the Cloudability is your FinOps. Apptio is that kind of cost optimization tooling. And then they do have another one called Target Process. So this says align, optimize, and transform how work gets done So I don't know. This is kind of workflows, business processes. It's that, it says it's enterprise agile planning. As a powerful and flexible enterprise agile planning SaaS solution that helps organizations scale agile practices and align them with business strategy. So maybe target process is the TBM tool. I don't know.
Could be.
I mean, they're not exactly spelling it out, which would have been really nice.
Yeah,
if they did that. But
yes, it was. You have to dig into that one to understand.
Yeah, because it says, it says things like resource management. So target process offers dynamic resource management, helping organizations manage resources, capacity, and demand effectively. How do you do that? What does it hook into? I don't know. I mean,
and which resources? Are we talking IT resources or business resources? Because
cloud resources.
Cloud resources. Yeah, exactly.
Data center resources. Oh no, we don't measure those, do we? We just let those run wild.
Yeah.
We just repatriate to them, and we don't think about the cost of those.
Yeah, but it's back to the, if this is trying to get a real handle on how improvements are improving the bottom and top line of a business, fine.
Yeah, right. But anyway, so TBM, that was kind of, I guess, the main thing that we picked up on a little bit in regards to.
We will revisit this, no doubt.
Yes, I think that if the white paper is really worth its salt, maybe we should look at that.
We've given it a bit of, we've given a fairly jaundiced view of it up to now. So let's see if it can live up to the
add more transparency. Yes, yes, let's do that. Okay. Yeah, they talk about dashboards and custom reports and so on. So maybe we can look at the white paper and see what that says from the TBM Council. I didn't know that existed, but there you go. So last point on this topic was the one I was going to surprise you about, which was you've probably never heard of it anyway. Have you heard of Intel Granulate?
No.
So this is not going to have the impact then that I was hoping it would. So Granulate is Intel's tool for really kind of doing that, sort of APM, monitoring, profiling, I think, level of, monitoring of applications and their performance and costs and things. So it's kind of been in that monitoring, but not kind of as in, oh, the app has failed, oh, the app is hung, the app has crashed, kind of not in that kind of. But
it's sort of workload management and workload.
Yeah. So it's kind of an APM type of thing. Yeah. Yep. So kind of quite close to sort of Turbonomic, which I think is also owned by IBM, I believe. It's acquired by IBM. So anyway, so Granulate was acquired by Intel about 3 years ago for $650 million, and they've just shut it down. So,
I mean, we've probably got a whole CSOP on Intel and their challenges, I think, coming up.
And believe it or not, that Intel is coming up as a topic. So you and I are going to discuss it hopefully before this side of Christmas anyway. So we'll see when we can squeeze it in. But yeah, so that was, I think, I actually looked at the possibility of working on that. I'm really grateful that I decided not to do it, because they probably ended up regretting it. Certainly people who've used it have probably ending up regretting it now, because apparently Intel has shut it down after $650 million acquisition, and only 3 years ago. So it was a obviously a separate company that they acquired.
It's a drop in the ocean for their losses in the last quarter.
Certainly for the losses, yes. In terms of how much money they've got in the bank, that would be a bit of a worry. But anyway, okay. So that's the TBM topic, Apptio topic. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. All right, so sovereign clouds. You wanted to touch on sovereign clouds. I've got a couple of points to mention, but I'll let you start the conversation.
So we obviously talked about data sovereignty, and again, this came out of something I was on a sort of panel debate that went on again in Barcelona on sovereign clouds, because obviously, they think they're private and therefore VMware have got an interest in them. And there was, guys from OVH Cloud, from a German provider, but also from a researcher at St Mary College London, University of London, who was really good. But the reason I wanted to bring it up was I think there is probably a lack of understanding about the gray areas or the risk in sovereign cloud. You aren't careful, and specifically because obviously what you're looking to try and do with the sovereign cloud is to ensure that you've got operational autonomy. You're basically stopping the ability of foreign governments to ask for or access or get hold of the data that you're holding. And there's clearly a difference between data residency and data sovereignty. We've seen a situation. You raised your fingers. You've obviously got we've seen situations where people have talked about data sovereignty, but they haven't realized that you've got to keep all the metadata and any other sort of assorted customer information completely within that sphere as well. And therefore, people have been caught out by, I've put my my data into a sovereign cloud or a sovereign area. If you look at what Google and Amazon and Microsoft have been doing, creating these regions and saying, "Hey, we've got that," but unfortunately, have sort of fallen foul of the fact that they didn't ensure that all the data was resident in that geography. So I think that's but the second one, and this one sort of came out slightly more strongly, was that if you're looking for a sovereign cloud provider, the only risk-free, and this is about risk, and it's not a black and white, decision. If you're looking for a risk-free cloud, sovereign cloud, you really need to go with a cloud provider who is local to the area you want to put it into and does not particularly, there'll be a number, but really restricts its operation. So, for example, in the EU, you might say because of the EU's laws around GDPR and the like, then, having a German or a French provider, and you can have a sovereign cloud because they'll follow the sovereignty and residency rules fairly strongly. The problem comes, whereas if you actually use a provider with operations in the States, or in the case of the hyperscalers who are based in the States, there's a real issue that under the terms of Patriot Act was replaced by the Cloud Act, and it got rid of the worst elements of the Patriot Act and the thing. But nonetheless, there was a real thing coming out from this guy from University of London who's been doing his research that says there is a danger that the US, and we all defaulted to the US, but you can imagine other jurisdictions might want to do this, could be able to legally request that what you thought was sovereign data. And make it even more than that. And it was interesting. The OVH Cloud guy was there, and OVH Cloud have an American operation. Now they've physically set the OVH Cloud operation up as a separate entity without no connection to OVH Cloud in Europe, quote unquote. But it's sort of you think how, and again the debate became twofold. One was, how far was that a mechanism to try and get round the potential problems of data residency and cloud sovereignty and all those sort of issues, so that the Americans couldn't get hold of it? And the view, if you like, the researchers' view was that in extreme cases, and again it's risk, in extreme cases, the American government might decide that they're going to take that one and test it in the courts.
Yeah, and just one point to make there is that because you were talking kind of about sort of data sovereignty, this is kind of more around sovereign cloud. So actually the compute aspect of it, I think, is also the another sort of focus, because data sovereignty, yes. I mean, this would kind of be part of that, but then there is the compute aspect of it. Not only is the physical part, so actually, where is the cloud data center actually located? Because believe it or not, clouds are actually they do run on computers, so they do have a hyperscale data centers.
You
So
heard it. You heard it here today,
you've
guys.
heard it here first, contrary to popular belief, where people just use iPhones. Go, oh yeah, I've got my phone, my photos all in the cloud somewhere. So that aspect of it, I think, is different because, as you said, for things like networking, for example. So if you're kind of connected to a network or using or you've got a particular network configuration, in the cloud, obviously a sovereign cloud will ensure that, hopefully, the idea is that it's within that particular geographic region, within the block or whatever, within even in country if necessary as well, so that the likes of NSA and whatever don't sort of
Yeah.
get their hands on it, or if you believe the Chinese rumors and kind of in terms of Huawei's switches kind of diverting network packets to China or something. So that would be part of that. But there's other aspects as well. So data residency, yes, as we said, that's kind of the data sovereignty aspect and encrypting that and so on. But then there's also things like EU-based support. Or European-based support. Let's say we're doing it in Europe, or we're doing it in the EU specifically, because as you mentioned, Germany and France. So it's kind of all the tech support and everything is exclusive. All the staff are there, so they're not offshore, for example. Right, and offshore can be anybody, really. US, India, China, whatever it's happening in Australia, what it happens to be. Then the other one is security. So not just the physical and kind of whatever security measures, but also things like encryption and key management as well, is all provided within that region, whatever that region is, as we said. However that region is really defined, as we said, whether it's the country or block or Europe or something. And then the other one is oversight. Having the oversight, in terms of safeguards and controls, and having compliance around, ensuring compliance around the sovereignty. So I think that brings in a lot more of the cloud itself, not just the data make sure it's running on local hard disks, in that hyperscale data center that happen to sit in, France, Germany, or in Europe in general, or the UK or something, versus the US or China or whatever.
I think the thing from my perspective, listening to what they were talking about, and obviously I think you've backed up an awful lot of what the guys on there were saying, is when you go as a customer to make your decision on a sovereign cloud, you've got to have a clear understanding of all those elements. And obviously your own risk, analysis and awareness. Yes, it sounds very nice to go to an AWS region or a GCP region and go, yeah, great. You need to dig into those things as to where that's all going to take place. All those elements we're talking about. So yeah, it's it just felt, because we talked data sovereignty, and you're right, this is much, much broader than that. But what came out was that, if you want a completely zero risk approach from a cloud sovereign perspective, in terms of, accountability, oversight, all those, you better have a local provider who doesn't, work broadly outside that region or that country.
Yeah.
Which was an interesting one. I mean, that, but it is about risk. I mean, sometimes it's not worth going down that route because the risk of it being an issue is very, very minor. Be aware of it. That's all it was, I think.
Yeah, and I think I mean the points I was actually making on that is all because apparently, well, T-Systems has a sovereign cloud. So we have a Google sovereign cloud, as well as a number of other sort of options for customers. So all of those points that I mentioned are kind of in that. That's what really T-Systems provides in terms of the features and functionality the Google sovereign cloud. So that's kind of a layer that we drop on top of GCP, Google Cloud Platform, to ensure that all those things actually are complied with. So that's certainly, seemingly is very important for German customers, certainly because of their sort of regulations and compliance that they need to, all the hoops that they need to jump through. But then it does extend also, EU-wide at least. I'm not sure if anybody in the UK really makes use of it, but certainly EU-wide, it's of interest to other countries as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a useful insight too, in the sense that just gives a level of comfort that actually people are looking into that. I mean, I just was listening to them speak, and there was, I say, OVH Cloud. I wish I could remember the name of I didn't take the name of the German provider down, but I just felt that unless you're aware of all the issues that you just said, you could make decisions that could still leave you at risk.
Yeah. So the one thing I was thinking, okay, so I mean, even the big three, the hyperscalers, also offer sort of sovereignty, I think, to certain degrees. But how can I don't know how you trust that. I mean, you can maybe trust sort of someone like someone like T-Systems, because they're kind of saying this is because we can offer it as, I believe my understanding is, it can be offered as a private cloud, but also it can be like I said, put on as a layer on top of things like GCP. So that vendor is within that same market, right? It's within that same geography and space or block. So you could probably look at that and say, okay, so I think they're kind of trying to meet everything that our mutual government kind of has put out on these things. So they're kind of compliant with that. But then I would, if it was kind of AWS or somebody who's kind of a lot bigger, and they're global in terms of their data centers and things like that. For things like networking, I'd probably want to say, actually, I want to put my own sniffer on the network to see where, what you're saying is actually happening, that all my packets are not going via, Kansas or something,
I mean,
coming back again.
Yeah, if you were, but even if, down to the situation where if you were use in a German environment with German customers, but you are an American company, let's say in the healthcare market, who's got information on German customers, but then the whole of the let's say AWS or Azure comes under American. Oh my goodness me, there's something going on. The question mark, and I say it is a question mark. I don't think it's been tested in the courts, but the question mark from the sort of legal researcher in the university was, this could be an issue if the Americans really want to make an issue of it. In terms of, but it would be costly. There would lawyers and God knows what.
Yeah. And wouldn't that be at the data protection layer though, at the sort of a GDPR? Rather than the physical cloud or how the data is how and where it's stored.
The suspicion was that if within that German operation there was data on American customers, for example, how do you separate that out? How do you ensure that the whole thing doesn't get sort of pulled into a?
Wouldn't it be the reverse? The GDPR sort of reverse, whatever the American version of GDPR is, and then that German company has to comply with that.
Cloud Act, yeah, it could be, it should be, but again, it just came out as a okay. There's some questions there around that, and we almost need a cloud lawyer to come and talk us through that.
Copilot,
which yeah,
Copilot,
well, yeah, or get a cloud lawyer in on this one, and you might lose all your audience. But I mean,
yes. I wouldn't be able to afford one, believe me. So it wouldn't come on for free.
I can think of a guy who'd come on probably for free. Frank Jennings. Have you come across Frank? No, great guy.
Oh, maybe we should have him.
I don't. He might be up for a.
That'll be cool. That'll be an interesting conversation. I'd be curious about because I mean, we're sort of, I think asking the right questions, but not necessarily sort of not
Well,
lawyers. We don't know the
no,
exact
exactly.
sources.
And it was the same in the panel debate, is that you got to that point where you're going, it's a potential risk, but I'm not quite sure how far,
Yeah.
they would take it. Would would Americans go to that level? If, funnily enough, all the debate focused on America.
I don't know. Yeah.
It was really strange. Yeah.
So the last point on that is, and I think this is where that kind of, because like the T-Systems sort of sovereign cloud, or indeed any really sovereign cloud that's kind of focused, is probably geographically based. It's kind of, in Europe, it's in Asia, it's in Australia, whatever, right? And it kind of stays there. It's not, T-Systems is not kind of saying we're going to do sovereign cloud in the US or sovereign cloud in Australia or something. And that's the difference between, something like that as a sovereign cloud versus, for example, as I said, you're trying to ensure that, let's say, your serverless environment doesn't start a resource in the US, whereas actually you were expecting it all to be in the AWS, EMEA region or European region, right? Or at least, in the data centers and the regions that are, located in Europe or the UK. So things like things like serverless, where we don't necessarily always care about where the compute resource is coming from. We just say, here's the image, spin it up. Here's the Terraform script to build the environment, and it goes off and create the world engine, as I call it, kind of generates that environment for you in the cloud. Using a serverless approach, whichever sort of platform is doing that, or function as a service, or any of those kind of really high end, cloud native, very sort of top end cloud native types of services that the larger global hyperscalers, larger global public cloud providers offer. So if I was to do that, is there something in the script I can put and say, make sure this is in the UK, or make sure this is only in Germany? If there's no resources in Germany, then don't spin up one up in Mozambique or something, that kind of stuff. So again, from that aspect of it, that will be an interesting one to explore. Maybe we should have that conversation with the.
I think we might have opened the Pandora's box here.
we may have. So we're kind of touching on it, but cloud security, I think, or cloud sovereignty rather, is I think just as important as the data sovereignty.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
we talked about.
It was as a counter to data sovereignty that I thought we ought to talk about clouds.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like I said, there is other elements of it that you can probably tease out and look at in more detail, because it's not just the data's residency, as we said, it's the, potentially things like support. We talked about, encryption and key management, oversights, and various other things as well that you could maybe look at.
Okay, good,
cool. All right, so I think we're there for this month. Paul, thank you as always. It's been a robust conversation. I've enjoyed the exchange. It's been really interesting topics. I think some have actually kind of meandered a little bit, but that's good. That's all kind of part of what we wanted to say, and it was kind of a good, good sort of rabbit holes that we went
just down. About kept within the guardrails.
Yeah, we almost kept it within the guardrails and the safety guards within that. Okay, cool. All the descriptions for all the stuff that we talked about, and a whole host more. If I can squeeze it into the description of the video, sometimes I can't do this. I actually have to put it in comments, because dear old YouTube only allows you, I think, 6,000 or 5,000 characters or something. But we will include lots of stuff in the description of the video, so check out all the links there. We'll talk a little bit about the previous episodes as well, so I'll mention those as those become relevant to this conversation. Love to hear from you, so drop us some comments as well in terms of what you guys are up to. Have any of these topics kind of affecting you? Are you interested in them? Are you doing them? That would be really cool. So yeah, drop us anything in the comments. That would be really appreciated. And indeed, as I always keep, I've recently tried, started reminding people, let us know what topics you want us to pick up on as well in the future. That would be really cool. That's it for this one, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel.